I am Liam Carter. I live a simple life in a small town. College was where everything changed for me. I met Emma Williams there. She looked at me and smiled. She said, "Hi Liam. You look lost." I laughed and said, "Maybe I am lost in life, not place." She sat beside me and we started talking every day after that. Emma became my world very quickly. I told myself she is the one for me. We spent hours talking about dreams and future. Emma said, "I will never leave you, Liam." I believed her completely without question. We planned a life together full of peace and love. But sometimes I noticed she was different. She would avoid my eyes when phone rang. I ignored it because I trusted her. Everything felt perfect. Too perfect, maybe. Then one night her phone kept ringing. She quickly picked it up and left the room. I asked her, "Who was calling?" She said, "Just work. Nothing important." But her voice was shaking slightly. I felt something was wrong inside me. Still I smiled and trusted her again. We continued our days like nothing changed. But deep inside I knew something was coming. Emma started staying out late more often. I asked her again, but she got angry. "Don't you trust me?" she said sharply. I said, "I do, but I am just worried." She turned away without answering. I felt distance growing between us. One evening I saw her with Noah, my best friend. They were talking too closely. My heart started beating fast. I wanted to believe it was nothing, but something inside me broke slightly. I walked away silently. That night I could not sleep. I kept thinking about Emma and Noah. What is going on between them? I asked myself. I decided to ignore it again. I told myself I was overthinking, but the truth was already close. Emma looked distant at breakfast. Noah texted me less now. I felt alone even with people. Emma said she needed space. I agreed, though it hurt. I trusted her more than myself. One night she didn't come home early. I waited in silence. She returned smiling but nervous. I asked, "Where were you?" She said, "Just with friends." I nodded, but I didn't believe her. I saw a message on her phone. It said, "We need to meet again." My hands started shaking. I realized everything was falling apart. I knew I had to find truth. Emma was no longer the same girl. I stood alone in my room thinking. I whispered, "Why is this happening?" "I will find out the truth, Emma." I couldn't eat that night. Emma avoided sitting near me. Noah stopped calling me brother. I felt betrayal growing like poison. Olivia noticed my sadness. She asked, "Are you okay?" I said, "I am fine." She said, "You don't look fine." I stayed silent. Emma laughed with Noah in distance. I felt my chest burning. I left the place early. I walked alone at Night Street. Lights were cold around me. I remembered Emma's promise. She said forever with me. I laughed painfully. Forever feels like a lie now. I returned home broken. My mother saw my face. She asked, "What happened, son?" I said, "Nothing, just tired." She hugged me silently. I cried that night alone. Next day, Emma acted normal. I couldn't understand her behavior. Noah avoided my eyes completely. I knew something big was coming. Olivia told me to be careful. I asked, "Careful about what?" She said, "About Emma and Noah." My heart dropped instantly. I said, "I already know something is wrong." I decided to watch them closely. I started gathering clues slowly. Every smile from Emma felt fake. I stopped trusting my own feelings. I became silent observer. Emma asked, "Why are you distant?" I said, "Nothing, just thinking." She looked suspicious. Noah met me alone one evening. He said, "We need to talk." I asked, "About what exactly?" He stayed silent for a moment. Then he said, "It's about Emma." My hands turned cold. I said, "Tell me everything." Emma texted me, "Come meet me." I stood frozen staring at message. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew everything was about to change. I replied, "I am coming." My heart was racing fast. I walked toward the meeting place. Every step felt heavy. I kept thinking betrayal is real. Emma was waiting there alone. She didn't smile this time. She said, "We need to talk." I said, "I already know something is wrong." She looked shocked. I stepped closer slowly. I said, "Tell me the truth now." She started crying quietly. I waited without blinking. She whispered, "I'm sorry, Liam." I felt my world breaking again. I said, "Sorry for what exactly?" She stayed silent again. I knew the truth was coming out. She said, "Noah and I are together." My chest felt empty. I laughed without emotion. I said, "So everything was a lie?" She nodded, crying harder. I stepped back slowly. I said, "I understand now." I turned away from her. She called my name, but I didn't stop. I walked away into the night. Everything inside me was silent. I whispered, "This is not end. I will rebuild myself, and one day she will regret losing me forever, completely, now, always." I started noticing changes in Emma. "Where are you going again?" I asked her one evening. She didn't even look at me. "Just busy, Liam." "Don't start again," she said. I frowned. "Again? I'm just asking." She grabbed her bag. "I told you, work stuff." But she wasn't meeting my eyes anymore. That's when I first felt the crack. A small one, but real. I tried to ignore it, because I trusted her. I kept telling myself, "It's nothing." At the same time, Noah Brown was always around me, my best friend. I smiled at him one day and said, "Bro, you're the only normal thing in my life." He laughed. "Don't say that, man. Life's not that bad." I said, "You don't understand. Emma's been acting weird." Noah paused for a second. Then he said, "Maybe you're thinking too much." I nodded slowly. "Maybe." But something in his voice felt off. I didn't know why. At work, I met Olivia Johnson. She was new, always calm, always kind. She said, "You look tired, Liam." I replied, "Life is just complicated." She smiled softly. "Complicated people need honest breaks." I laughed a little. "I wish it was that easy." She started sitting with me during breaks. Talking to her felt easy. No pressure. No lies. Just peace. One day she asked, "Is it about someone?" I hesitated. Then I said, "Yeah, someone I trust." She nodded. "Trust breaks slowly. That's the dangerous part." Her words stayed in my head. Meanwhile, Emma kept getting more distant. "Where were you last night?" I asked her again. She rolled her eyes. "Why are you always questioning me?" "I'm not questioning. I just miss you." She sighed. "Liam, I need space." Those words hurt more than I showed. "Space from me?" I asked quietly. She said nothing, just walked away. I stood there alone. That night Noah came to my place. He said, "You look stressed." I said, "Because I am." "Emma is changing." He leaned back on the chair. "Girls change sometimes," he said casually. I stared at him. "Why do you sound like you don't care?" He quickly smiled. "I do care. I just don't want you overthinking." But something about his smile felt forced. I said, "Do you think she's hiding something?" Noah shrugged. "I don't know." Too quick. Too simple. I started watching them more after that. Emma and Noah. I didn't want to, but I couldn't stop myself. One evening at work, Olivia noticed my silence. She said, "You're somewhere else again." I replied, "I think I'm losing something important." She asked softly, "Or someone?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. Days passed like that, confusion growing inside me. Emma texting less, Noah staying quiet more, and me, stuck between doubt and love. One night Emma said, "I'm going out." I asked, "With who?" She snapped, "Why do you always need details?" I said, "Because I care about you." She looked at me for a second, then said, "Just stop it, Liam," and left. I stood there again, empty. Noah called me later. "Let's meet," he said. I asked, "Why?" He replied, "Just talk." Something felt wrong, but I went anyway. We met near the cafe. He said, "You're becoming paranoid." I said, "Or maybe I'm seeing what you don't want me to see." He laughed nervously. "Relax, man. but his hands were shaking slightly. I noticed that, and I didn't like it. Later that day, Olivia said, "If something feels wrong, it usually is." I said, "I don't want to believe that." She replied, "Belief doesn't change reality." Her words stayed with me again. That night, everything changed. I was walking home early. Street lights were dim. I passed near the old library. And then I stopped. I saw Emma and Noah standing too close, talking quietly. Noah touched her arm slightly. Emma didn't move away. I hid behind a wall instantly. My heart started beating fast. "What is this?" I whispered. I couldn't breathe properly. Emma laughed softly. That sound hit me harder than anything. Noah leaned closer and said something I couldn't hear. Emma nodded. My hands went cold. I stepped back slowly. No, this can't be. But I kept watching, waiting for it to make sense. Waiting for a reason. Any reason. But deep down, I already felt it breaking. Something inside me cracked fully this time. And I still whispered to myself, "Please don't be what I think it is." I remember the night everything burned inside me. Emma texted me first. "Come meet me. We need to talk." Just that one line. No emotion. No smile. Nothing. I replied, "Where?" She sent a location near the old cafe. My hands already felt heavy. I didn't know why. When I reached there, Emma was already standing. Noah was beside her. That was the first thing that felt wrong. I said, "Why is Noah here?" Emma didn't look at me. She said quietly, "Because he knows everything." I frowned. "Everything about what?" Noah looked away. Not even a single word. I stepped closer. "Someone explain to me what's going on." Emma finally looked at me. Her eyes were cold. Not the Emma I knew. She said, "Liam, I can't do this anymore." My heart paused. I said, "Do what?" She took a breath. "You and me," she said. I felt like the ground moved under me. I laughed nervously. "This is a joke, right?" She shook her head. "No." Silence hit me hard. I looked at Noah. "Bro, say something." He stayed silent. That silence hurt more than her words. I said again, louder, "Noah." He finally whispered, "I'm sorry." That was it. Just sorry. I turned back to Emma. "Tell me the truth," I said. She crossed her arms. "I never loved you the way you loved me." My chest went empty instantly. I said, "Then what was everything?" She replied coldly, "Comfort, maybe habit." I felt my hands shaking. I said, "You promised me forever." She looked away. I changed. That word destroyed me more than anything. I stepped back. "So this is it? You just replace me?" She didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "I found someone better for my future." I frowned. "Someone better?" She nodded slightly. Before I could speak, another voice came. "You should listen to her." A man stepped forward. Well-dressed. Confident. Cold smile. Emma said softly, "Daniel." That name hit different. Daniel Scott. He looked at me like I was nothing. He said, "She deserves a better life than this." I laughed in shock. "And you think that's you?" He smiled. "I already gave her what you couldn't." I looked at Emma. "Is this true?" She didn't deny it. That was worse. I said, "So you chose him?" Emma said, "I had to think about my future." I felt like I couldn't breathe. Noah finally spoke. "Liam, I didn't want it to happen like this." I stared at him. "You were my brother." He looked down. "I know." I stepped back slowly. Everything inside me was breaking in pieces. I said, "So both of you plan this?" Silence again. That silence answered everything. I felt something snap inside me. My voice got lower. "Was anything real?" Emma hesitated, then said, "Some things were. That some killed me." I turned away slightly. My vision blurred. I whispered, "I trusted you with my life." Emma said nothing. Daniel said, "Let's end this drama." I turned sharply. "Don't talk to me like I'm nothing." He smiled. "But you are nothing to her now." That sentence burned through me. I felt my breath shaking. My phone rang. I didn't even look. But I heard my mother's voice later when I reached home. Liam? Where are you? I said nothing at first. Then I said, I'm coming home. She asked, Are you okay? I forced my voice. Yes, I'm fine. But I wasn't. When I entered the house, she saw my face. She said, What happened? I tried to speak, but nothing came out. I just said, It's over. She hugged me instantly. Tell me, she said softly. And I broke. For the first time, I couldn't hold it. I lost everything, I said. She held me tighter. You didn't lose everything, she whispered. But I didn't believe her. That night, I couldn't sleep. Emma's words kept repeating in my head. I never loved you. Morning came, but I didn't feel it. Noah's silence. Emma's cold eyes. Daniel's smile. Everything stuck inside me. My mother said, Don't go outside like this. But I already stood up. I said, I need air. She said, Liam. But I walked out anyway. Rain started slowly, then heavier. I didn't care. I walked through the empty streets. Soaked. Broken. My voice came out low. So this is love? I laughed once. No. This is betrayal. I stopped under a streetlight. My fists tightened. I whispered, You will regret this, Emma. Not loud. Not angry. Just empty. And something inside me changed forever that night. I was no longer the same Liam who believed in love. I walked forward into the rain. And I promised myself, I will never break like this again. I stopped recognizing myself after that night. Days passed, but I barely spoke. My mother kept trying. Liam, eat something, she said softly. I replied, I'm not hungry. She sat beside me. You can't stay like this. I said, I'm fine. But I wasn't fine at all. Emma's voice kept repeating in my head. I never loved you. Those words didn't leave me. One afternoon, Olivia Johnson came to my workplace. She looked at me and said, You look like you're disappearing. I forced a small laugh. Maybe I already did. She didn't smile back. She said, That's not true. You're still here. I looked away. Feels like I'm not. She pulled a chair and sat in front of me. Talk to me, Liam. I said, There's nothing to talk about. She replied, People don't go silent for nothing. That hit me. I stayed quiet. Then she said, Is it her? I didn't answer, but she already knew. She said softly, You loved someone who didn't hold you the same way. My throat tightened. I said, It's worse than that. She asked, How? I looked at her finally. She replaced me like I never existed. Olivia stayed silent for a moment. Then she said, That doesn't define you. I laughed a little. It feels like it does. She leaned forward. Then change what it means. I frowned. How? She said. Start moving again, even if it hurts. I didn't respond, but something inside me listened. Later that week, I met Mr. Henry Clark. He was my company's senior manager. He said, You're the one who used to be sharp at work? I replied, Used to be. He looked at my file, then at me. He said, Pain doesn't erase skill. It just hides it. I stayed quiet. He said, Do you want to stay broken or rebuild? That question stayed in my head. I said, I don't know anymore. He nodded. Then start small. Show up. Think. Work. I asked, Why do you care? He replied, Because I've seen men lose themselves. It's ugly. I didn't know what to say. He stood up. Come tomorrow. We start fresh. And he walked away. That night I couldn't sleep again. But something felt different. Not healed. Just awake. Next morning I went to work earlier. Olivia noticed immediately. She smiled slightly. You came. I said, I'm trying. She replied, That's enough for now. I nodded. Days slowly started changing. Mr. Clark kept pushing me. Focus. Stop thinking about what you can't fix. Build what you can control. I asked him one day, Does pain ever stop? He replied, No. but it stops controlling you. That stayed with me. At night, I still thought about Emma, but less each day. One evening, Olivia said, "You're quieter now, but different." I said, "Different good or bad?" She replied, "Stronger quiet." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. Still, I couldn't fully let go. Sometimes I saw Emma's social media, pictures, laughter, luxury, Daniel Scott beside her. She looked distant from who I knew. I closed my phone quickly. My jaw tightened. "She moved on fast," I whispered. Then I stopped myself. No, I shouldn't care. But I did. Mr. Clark once saw me distracted. He said, "You're looking at something you shouldn't." I said, "I can't help it." He replied, "Then control it." I asked, "How?" He said, "Stop feeding your pain." So I tried. But it wasn't easy. One day, Olivia said, "You still think about her?" I didn't lie. "Yes." She nodded. "That's normal. But don't live there." I said, "I don't know where else to go." She replied, "Forward." That word stuck. Forward. Not back. Not revenge. Just forward. But deep inside me, something else was forming too. Not loud. Not visible. Just quiet. Observation. I started noticing everything again. Emma's posts. Daniel's business moves. Noah's disappearance from my life. I wasn't chasing revenge. At least I told myself that. But I was watching. Carefully. Silently. Mr. Clark noticed my focus increasing. He said, "Good. You're coming back." I asked, "What if I don't want to be who I was?" He replied, "Then become someone better." Olivia smiled at me one day. "You're not broken anymore," she said. I shook my head. "I still feel it." She said, "Feeling it is different from being it." That made me think. That night, I stood alone on the rooftop. Wind was cold. City lights below. I whispered, "I lost her, but maybe I lost myself first." I closed my eyes, then opened them again. "No," I said quietly. "I'm still here." And for the first time, I believed it a little. Not healed, not happy, but rebuilding. Slowly, quietly, from ashes. Detective Mason Reed came into my life unexpectedly. It happened at work. He showed his ID and said, "I need to speak with you, Liam Carter." I frowned. "Me? Why?" He replied, "About Daniel Scott." That name hit me instantly. I said, "I don't know him personally." He looked at me carefully. People around him always say that first. I stayed quiet. Olivia pulled me aside later. She whispered, "He's investigating something serious." I asked, "What kind of investigation?" She said, "Corruption, business deals, money trails." My chest tightened. I said, "Why is he talking to me then?" She replied, "Because you're connected indirectly." I didn't like that answer. Later, Detective Mason sat with me again. He said, "I'm going to be direct." I replied, "Please do." He placed a file on the table. "Daniel Scott is under watch for illegal financial activity." I frowned. "And I'm supposed to care why?" He said, "Because your name is showing up near his circle." My heart slowed. I said, "That's impossible." He leaned forward. "Is it?" I stayed silent. He continued, "Emma Williams, Noah Brown. Do those names mean anything to you?" I felt my stomach drop. I said, "They're people from my past." He nodded. "Then you're already inside the story." That made me uneasy. Later, I met Olivia again. I said, "Why didn't you tell me any of this earlier?" She replied, "Because I wasn't sure you were ready." I said, "Ready for what?" She looked serious. "Truth isn't gentle, Liam." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Emma, about Daniel, about everything. I whispered, "Is she just a victim? Or part of it?" I didn't know anymore. Next day, Detective Mason called me again. He said, "You need to understand something." I replied, "I'm listening." He said, "Daniel doesn't just do business. He controls people." I frowned. Controls how? He said. Money, fear, influence. I stayed quiet. He added, Emma Williams is currently tied to him financially and emotionally. My breath paused. I said, so she's trapped. He replied, maybe, or maybe she chose it. That sentence hurt more than I expected. I said, I don't believe she's like that. He looked at me directly. You still care about her. I didn't answer, because it was true. Olivia later said, you're getting pulled back in emotionally. I said, I'm just trying to understand. She replied, understanding can turn into obsession. I shook my head. I don't want revenge. She said, then what do you want? I paused. I want truth. That was the first honest thing I said in days. Detective Mason met me again. He said, I need help from someone inside this circle. I said, I'm not inside anything. He replied, you are closer than you think. He slid a document toward me. Bank records, transfers, hidden connections. I stared at it. This is real. He nodded. Very. I saw Emma's name appear in small traces. My hands tightened. I whispered, why her? Mason said, that's what we're trying to find out. I felt torn inside. Olivia asked me later, what did he show you? I said, things I shouldn't have seen. She replied, now you can't unsee them. That night I sat alone again. I opened my phone. Emma's photo was still there. Smiling. I whispered, are you lying? Or being used? I closed it quickly. My mind felt heavy. I met Noah briefly the next day. He looked nervous. I said, we need to talk. He replied, I don't think that's a good idea. I stepped closer. Just tell me one thing. He avoided my eyes. I asked, is Emma safe? He stayed silent. That silence answered too much. I said, so you know something. He whispered, Liam, leave it alone. That made me more alert. I said, I can't. He looked at me finally. Daniel doesn't forgive mistakes. I asked, what does that mean? Noah didn't answer. He walked away fast. I stood there confused and angry. Later, Detective Mason warned me again. He said, you're getting closer to danger. I said, I just want answers. He replied, answers come with consequences. I said, I can handle it. He looked serious. No, you think you can. That's different. That stayed with me. At night, I made a decision. Olivia asked, what are you going to do? I said, dig deeper. She said, for revenge. I shook my head. No, for truth. But deep inside me, I wasn't fully sure anymore. I was already inside something bigger, and I was not stepping back now. Sophie Williams texted me late at night. I need to meet you. Alone. That message stayed in my head for hours. I finally replied, where? She sent a location near the quiet Riverside Cafe. When I arrived, she was already there. She looked nervous. She said, thank you for coming. I replied, just tell me why I'm here. She hesitated, then said, it's about Emma. My chest tightened instantly. I said, what about her? Sophie looked down. You don't know the full truth. I frowned. Then start talking. She took a breath. Emma didn't choose everything herself. I said sharply, what does that mean? She replied, Daniel Scott changed her life. I stayed silent. She continued, he offered money, status, control over her future. I said, so she agreed willingly? Sophie shook her head fast. No, not fully. That confused me. I asked, then what happened? She looked at me seriously. She was pressured. Slowly. Step by step. I felt my jaw tighten. Sophie added, he made her believe you weren't enough. That hit deeper than I expected. I said, and Noah? She hesitated again. Then said, he worked for Daniel. My breath stopped. I said, no. She nodded. He helped arrange things. Meetings. Messages. Distance between you two. I felt my hands shake. So it was all planned? I asked. Sophie said softly, yes. My voice dropped. So my life was manipulated? She didn't deny it. That silence burned me. I stood up slightly. Why are you telling me this now? She looked guilty. Because I couldn't carry it anymore. I said, you watched all this happen? She whispered, I was scared of Daniel too. That made me pause. She continued, Emma is not as strong as she looks. I laughed bitterly. So she broke me? But she's also a victim? Sophie nodded slowly. Yes. That word created chaos inside me. I sat back down. My head felt heavy. I said, I don't understand what I'm supposed to feel. She replied, you can feel everything. That's normal. I looked at the river water. It moved slowly, like my thoughts. I said, I hated her, then paused. But I also loved her. Sophie said quietly, both can be true. That confused me even more. I whispered, so what is she now, enemy or victim? Sophie didn't answer immediately, then said, maybe both. I closed my eyes. Images came back. Emma laughing. Emma crying. Emma walking away. I felt anger rising again. I said, and Noah? He betrayed me like I was nothing. Sophie looked down. He was under pressure too. I said sharply, that doesn't justify it. She nodded. I know. Silence fell between us. Then she said, I'm sorry. I should have stopped it earlier. I looked at her. Sorry doesn't fix what happened. She replied, I know. My voice got lower. I lost everything because of their choices. Sophie said softly, not everything was your fault. I laughed bitterly. It feels like it was. She said, Daniel makes people believe that. That name again. Daniel Scott. I felt something shift inside me. Not just sadness anymore. Something sharper. I asked, where is Emma now? Sophie hesitated. With him. That answer hurt more than I expected. I stood up. So she's still there? Sophie said, she doesn't know how to leave easily. I clenched my fists. I should hate her. Sophie replied, do you? I didn't answer immediately, because the truth was messy. I said quietly, I don't know anymore. Sophie looked relieved and worried at the same time. She said, that means you still care. I looked away. I care, but I'm also angry. She nodded. That's what truth does. I turned toward the river again. My voice dropped. So what now? Sophie said, now you decide what kind of person you want to be. I laughed slightly. I don't even know who I am anymore. She replied, then rebuild again. That word again. Rebuild. I had just started doing that. Now everything was shaking again. I said, if Daniel is behind all this, I won't stay silent. Sophie looked at me carefully. Be careful. He destroys people who come close. I said, he already destroyed me once. She stayed quiet. I added, now I just know his name. Sophie said softly, that's more dangerous. I looked at her. I'm not going back to being blind. She nodded slowly. Then stay alive in the process. I turned away from the river. My mind was no longer confused. It was divided. Pain on one side, truth on the other, and something growing in between. Control. Or maybe revenge. I wasn't sure yet, but I knew one thing clearly. This story wasn't finished with me. Not even close. Detective Mason Reed called me early morning. Are you ready? He asked. I replied, I don't think I have a choice anymore. He said, you always had a choice. Now you're just finally using it. That line stayed in my head. I met him later at a quiet office. He slid a folder toward me. This is what we need, he said. I opened it slowly. What am I looking at? I asked. He replied, financial trails, hidden accounts, Daniel Scott's network. I frowned. This is bigger than I thought. He said, always is. I asked, what do you need from me? He leaned back. Proof from inside connections. People trust you more than us. I laughed bitterly. Funny. I was the one they destroyed. He said calmly, then use that.
Later, met Olivia.
She said, you look different now. I replied, I feel different. She asked, good different or dangerous different? I said, both maybe. She sighed, just don't lose yourself again. I nodded. I won't. But I wasn't fully sure. I started gathering small details. Emails, patterns, names, quietly, carefully. Every step felt like pulling strings in the dark. Olivia helped from behind the scenes. She said, be careful. Daniel's people watch everything. I replied, I'm not afraid anymore. She looked at me. That's what scares me. I didn't answer. Days passed like that. Slow pressure building. Then Noah called me. I didn't want to pick up, but I did. His voice was shaky. Liam, we need to talk. I said, we already did. He said, please, just listen. I replied, why now? He paused. Things are getting worse. I said, for who? He whispered, for all of us. I stayed silent. He added, Daniel is angry. I laughed softly. Good. He said quickly, you don't understand what he can do. I replied, I understand enough. I hung up. Later, Detective Mason said, pressure is working. I asked, how do you know? He said, Daniel's accounts are freezing. Investigations are spreading. I felt something shift inside me. I asked, so it's starting? He nodded. Yes, the fall begins now. That sentence stayed with me. The fall begins. I watched carefully as things changed. Daniel's influence started shrinking. Business partners pulling away. Rumors spreading. Legal pressure increasing. It was slow, but real. Olivia said, you're not reacting anymore. You're calculating. I said, I'm just watching. She replied, that's what I mean. I didn't deny it. Then Emma appeared again in everything indirectly. She sent me a message. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply. Olivia saw my phone. She said, you won't go, right? I said, no, but my voice wasn't fully certain. Detective Mason warned me, don't get emotionally pulled back in. I said, I'm not the same person anymore. He replied, that's exactly why you must be careful. Noah tried again. He met me outside my workplace. He looked broken. Liam, I messed up. I said, that's not news. He stepped closer. I didn't know how deep it was. I replied, you helped it happen. He shook his head. I was scared. I said coldly, so was I. Silence. He whispered, please forgive me. I looked at him for a long moment, then said, no. He froze. I continued, forgiveness doesn't erase what you did. His eyes dropped. I lost everything too, he said. I replied, you helped me lose mine first. He stepped back slowly. I'm sorry. I said, don't say it again. He left quietly. No anger, just distance. Olivia saw everything. She said softly, that was cold. I replied, it had to be. She asked, do you feel better? I paused. Yes, and I meant it, because something inside me had stabilized. Not healed, not soft, but controlled. Detective Mason called later. It's accelerating, he said. I asked, how fast? He replied, fast enough that Daniel is losing grip. I nodded slowly. Good. He said, you sound like you expected this. I replied, I did. Emma's name came up again in files. She was starting to question Daniel. Confusion, fear, doubt. Olivia said, she's realizing the truth now. I said, too late maybe. She looked at me. Do you still care? I didn't answer immediately, then said, I don't know what I feel anymore. That was honest. At night I stood alone, watching city lights. No pain screaming anymore, just silence, control, power slowly returning. I whispered, I'm not broken anymore, then corrected myself. I'm not the same man who was broken. And for the first time, I felt the fall happening around me, and I was not the one falling anymore. Emma texted me early morning. Please, meet me one last time. I stared at the message for a long time. Olivia noticed and asked, Are you going? I said, I don't know. She replied, You already know the answer. But I still went. Detective Mason called me before I left. It's happening, he said. I asked, Daniel. He replied, Arrest order is active. Evidence worked. I stayed silent. He added, This is your final step out of this. I said, Good. When I arrived, everything was already collapsing outside Daniel Scott's world. Police cars, chaos, people shouting. Olivia was there too. She said, You saw it? I nodded. It's done. She looked relieved. Then it's over. But I didn't feel the same. Noah was standing near the gate, surrounded by officers. He saw me and whispered, Liam. I didn't answer. His voice broke. I ruined everything. I looked at him once, then walked past. No anger left, just emptiness. Then I saw Emma. She was standing away from the crowd, eyes red, hands shaking. She said, Liam, please listen. I stopped. She stepped closer. I'm sorry, she cried. I didn't know how to escape him. I looked at her quietly. No anger, no love, just silence. She said, Please say something. I finally spoke. What do you want me to say? She cried harder. I loved you. I really did. I shook my head slowly. No, you chose your path. She whispered. I was scared. I replied. So was I. Silence fell between us. She reached for my hand. I didn't move. She said, Can we fix this? I looked at her fully, and for the first time, I felt nothing. I said, You don't need fixing from me. She froze. I continued, You broke me once. Her eyes widened. I said softly, But I rebuilt myself without you. She stepped back. Liam. I said, I don't hate you. She looked confused. I added, But I don't need you either. That hit her harder than anger. She started crying again. I turned slightly. Daniel is gone now, I said. She nodded weakly. I said, So is the version of me that loved you blindly. She whispered, What am I to you now? I paused. Just someone from my past. Nothing more. She broke down completely. I didn't stay. I walked away. No revenge. No shouting. Just silence. Outside, Olivia waited. She said, You handled it better than I expected. I replied, I didn't handle it. I let it go. She nodded slowly. My mother came and held my hand. She said, Are you okay now? I looked at her. I will be. That was enough. We walked together away from everything. Behind us, chaos faded. Ahead, something new started. Olivia said, What now? I looked forward. Now I live. She smiled slightly. Finally. And in my mind, I thought one last thing. Love broke me once, but it also rebuilt me into something stronger than I ever was before.